I have wasted too much of my life navigating the job market. I've applied to thousands of jobs for which I was overqualified because I possessed the knowledge and the skill required to do them, and yet I never heard back. Many of the companies I applied to never responded because they were advertising jobs that did not exist, thereby opening themselves up to class action lawsuits because of their job fraud. And those who responded often gaslighted me by pretending that I needed an arbitrary amount of experience and education to be hired for the positions to which I had applied. And because I work in cybersecurity, which is a notoriously difficult field to enter due to the experience requirements hiring managers impose on applicants, this problem was especially pronounced. However, I was eventually able to break into the field and secure my employment. Upon entering my role, I discovered that the tasks assigned to me were so trivial that a teenager could perform them. Later, I ascended into a better role with another firm, and my job there was even more accessible, although it had stricter educational and experiential requirements for entry. And I used my free time to reflect on how absurdly high the hurdles I needed to cross were, and how fortunate I was to overcome the unnecessary requirements imposed upon me. While doing so, I realized several lies I had been taught about work experience, and addressing this lie in a public forum, such as YouTube, would be beneficial because many people are denied employment and promotion because they lack work experience, and we must both address and understand the lie that is used to sustain their suffering if we are ever going to alleviate it. The first lie is that you need work experience in order to perform the duties of a job at a professional level, and it is easy to prove this is a lie by simply thinking about the topic for any length of time. The following thought experiment will help demonstrate it. Suppose that two people were entrusted to be accountants. The first person was an angelic being who materialized out of nothing and had both perfect knowledge of all accounting practices and the character needed to fulfill the duties of an accountant. Meanwhile, the second person had worked as an accountant for 20 years, but he was totally incompetent and corrupt across all relevant domains, and he had managed to avoid termination because he was either well liked by his employer or because he was able to pass the blame for his failures on to others. Now, which do you suppose would be the superior accountant? The perfect accountant with no work experience, or the moronic psychopath with 20 years under his belt? Well, if you're sane, then you'll pick the former, but if you're a baby boomer or a hiring manager, then you'll pick the handicapped psychopath on account of his experience. Because in order to be a good accountant, you don't actually need experience. Instead, you need to be good at accounting. And the fact that the second person had managed to be an incompetent psychopath for a long time would not mean that he was good at accounting. Of course, some low IQ people will say that you need experience in order to become good at a thing. This is also a lie, and it is a lie in both of its plausible interpretations. First, we know that the possession of work experience is not a guarantor of competence in a job because baby boomers exist and participate in the job market. Many people in this population have managed to retain their jobs for quite a long time, yet they have failed to attain any great level of success within their field. And many are either incompetent or mediocre, so a motivated newcomer could plausibly surpass them in a short amount of time. And the second interpretation, which holds that a skilled person must have performed the acts of their skill and therefore have experience, is also a lie because of how the word experience is commonly understood. To better understand my point, consider the case of two aspiring bodybuilders. The first bodybuilder is rather unimpressive. He goes to the gym once per month and spends 1 hour inside each time. He does this for 10 years and lives on a diet of cheeseburgers and pudding. Meanwhile, the second bodybuilder spends 5 hours each day exercising in the gym. He keeps to a strict workout regimen, he eats 100 grams of protein every day, and he toughens himself up by eating a bowl of nails for breakfast each morning, and without any milk. He does this for 2 years. Now, of the two bodybuilders, the first has more experience, but he is totally inept, and the second has much less experience, but is far more worthy of the title. And this proves the great problem of experience. Its unit of measurement is wrong. Experience is measured in time, yet it should be measured in deeds. More specifically, it should be measured in deeds that enhance a person's skill in the area of the experience. And a person who gets good quickly will be far better than someone who sucked for a long time and still does. Then again, some people may claim that if two people with similar levels of competence and commitment work in the same position, then the one who has been there longer should be the better performer. And I agree, up to a point. Because although the person with more experience might be the better performer for a time, that edge will disappear because of the law of diminishing returns. To better understand this, consider the act of blinking one's own eyes. I can blink my eyes. I am 30 years old, so I have been blinking for 30 years. I have 30 years of experience blinking my eyes. Yet I am not better at blinking now than I was when I was 20 or when I was 10, and I will not be better at blinking when I am 50, because blinking is a skill that is learned and mastered almost immediately, and once your skill cap is reached, you do not improve at it. And most jobs are like blinking. You develop skill in those jobs until you reach your skill cap. At that point, you cease to improve, and farther experience will not lead to increased performance. So although experience may be valuable, it ceases to matter after a certain level is reached, and the skill caps for most jobs can be reached in a relatively short time. Moreover, time spent in a job after the skill cap is reached cannot yield increased performance. If anything, it actually makes the employee worse, because they can set their brain on autopilot after attaining a certain level of competence. Many succumb to this temptation, and, when they do, they allow their mental faculties to stagnate. In so doing, they become less competent than a highly motivated newcomer who has not yet chosen to rest on their laurels. And this is the reason why people who spent 20 years working in a job that they mastered in 5 should not be respected. The opposite is true. They should be derided because they spent the last 15 years of their life stagnating. Yet we observe these people in real life, and they often believe their extended complacency is admirable. How deluded are they? Now, I have thus far refuted the lie of necessary work experience through both deductive reasoning and appeals to personal observation, and these are sufficient to convince me, but I know that some people will pretend to require empirical evidence in order to believe as I do. I personally believe this is an immature and fake requirement presented by people who are so preoccupied with pretending to be smart that they have forsaken the use of their brains, but it is also a requirement which has already been met. Several times, in fact. The first time the lie of necessary work experience was empirically refuted was in 1988, when a team of researchers published their discovery of the law of diminishing returns and its influence on job performance in the Journal of Applied Psychology. A second occurred in 1995 and was published in the Journal of Personnel Psychology and corroborated the results of the first, and the researchers there found that time spent with a particular company was more important in determining success than general work experience. And a third conducted in 1998 and published in the Psychological Bulletin reinforced the conclusions of the preceding two and the conclusions I previously deduced. It held that general cognitive ability, which is a function of IQ and character, is a better predictor of job performance than is experience. So the conclusions about the irrelevance of work experience that we can easily observe and which we can also deduce are farther reinforced by social scientists, and I will include links to the research papers corroborating my position in the description of this video. Now, I can easily anticipate some pushback from people who believe that experience is important, because they have observed competence from experienced people and incompetence from inexperienced ones. And, understandably, these observations might trick someone, but the argument is malformed, because although there are experienced people who are competent, there are also experienced people who are incompetent. And although there are inexperienced people who are incompetent, there are also those who are unusually skilled. And this is exactly what we would expect to see if there were no correlation, either positive or negative, between work experience and competence. So the counterclaim is not really a counter at all, but a verification from personal experience that the empirical observations I previously mentioned were right. However, there is a case wherein experience is valuable, and what I hinted at before I will clearly state here. Experience is valuable when the person who possesses it is reasonably competent and motivated, when the field in which the experience is held is complex enough to have a noticeable learning curve, and where the difficulty is a property of the field itself and not of the organizations wherein the field is practiced, and when the possessor has not encountered the law of diminishing returns. When these properties align, then experience matters. We know work experience is overblown in bupkis. We can prove it through deductive reasoning and verify it both empirically and through everyday observation. Moreover, the apparent lie that work experience is needed for most jobs is used to damage the prospects of job seekers and career-oriented people, so it is both prudent and charitable to discard the lie altogether. However, worthless people continue to tell the lie, and, in so doing, erect hurdles for their fellow man when they could easily choose not to. By their efforts, they make life a little bit more hellish for others, and, eventually, for themselves. And I attribute this sociopathy to 3 sources. The first is parrotry, and by parrotry, I mean the tendency for low IQ and lazy people to repeat cliches and buzzwords because they cannot be bothered to think of their own things to say. Most people who pay lip service to the importance of experience only do so because they observe others doing so and repeat what they've heard. By the repetitions of the parrots, the lie of necessary experience proliferates throughout the population. However, the parrots merely repeat, they do not create. Therefore, although parrotry explains why the lie is sustained, it fails to identify the origin. For that, a different explanation is needed, and the easiest way to acquire it is to ask, cui bono? Who benefits from the lie of necessary experience? And I identify 2 groups that benefit from the lie, losers and baby boomers. I will address the losers first. A large population of superfluous people exists. Many people do not have a single achievement to their name. They never earned a doctorate, wrote a book, composed a song, patented an invention, mastered a skill, cultivated a virtue, achieved a tremendous athletic accomplishment, or did anything else that was noteworthy. They are utterly worthless and incompetent across all domains and can never feel a sense of self-worth by pointing to their achievements because they don't have any. And most people belong to this group, and they want to feel like they're worth something. So they derive their sense of self-worth from things that are not achievements. Some people are proud of their height, which they didn't need to earn. Others are proud of their intelligence, which is primarily genetic too, and women like to draw their sense of importance from their relationships with people who are better than themselves. And losers who stayed in their dead-end jobs for 20 years because they lacked the ambition and the initiative to leave draw their sense of self-worth from their experience. They inflate the importance of experience so they can more easily live with themselves and, in so doing, reinforce the lie. This, in turn, makes life more difficult for people who have been barred from the job market on account of a fake experience deficiency. They are being held to the lies that the losers told themselves and suffer unnecessarily. But the people who are unable to progress in their lives because of the lying losers are also stopped by our sociopathic elders, the baby boomers, many of whom belong to the population of losers, and yet should still be treated as a distinct group because even successful baby boomers repeat the lie of necessary experience. Baby boomers repeat the lie because it is a form of age-based discrimination directed against the young. We see this most easily when we observe a 25-year-old being rejected from a job for which he might perform reasonably well because the hiring managers pretended he needed 2 decades of prior experience to occupy it. But how can a man in his 20s have 20 years of experience in a job? Child labor laws make such a situation impossible. But it is much easier for a man who has occupied the workforce for 40 years to possess the 20 years of experience assigned to the job. So experience requirements discriminate against the young in favor of the old. From this, we can conclude that civil rights laws should treat such age-based discrimination as a felony, because they do so in similar cases. However, this judgment has not been forthcoming, nor will it be, because experience is a form of age-based discrimination that favors the boomers. And, because the boomers are what they are perfectly happy to laud the triumphs of civil rights, while conveniently ignoring it when doing so happens to suit their interests, and especially if it sabotages their children. So although civil rights law would, and could, and should prevent the age-based discrimination that masquerades as an experience requirement if its most fervent advocates truly believed it, they do not, so it does not. Thus, the younger generations will continue to suffer the thinly veiled violation of their civil rights that is the lie of necessary work experience until the day finally comes when enough boomers have died that their progeny can finally assert themselves. And, when that day comes, we will prove ourselves better than the boomers and discard the lie. Of course, some may claim that the jobs for which so much experience has been prescribed truly require it, but we know this is a lie because most jobs of this sort are managerial positions that are currently being replaced by artificial intelligence, and an AI has even less experience than a 25-year-old. Furthermore, many companies are failing, and their management is always to blame. They are culpable for the failure either because they misused resources or because they failed to overcome the challenges their businesses faced. And you most certainly do not need decades of experience in order to run a company into the ground. Certainly, a teenager is just as capable of mismanaging a business as an incompetent loser who managed to fail his way upward for 30 years. And you can pay the teenager less. So, quite insanely, it is a wiser decision to hire a teenager to manage a failing company in the middle of its collapse than it is to hire someone with many years of experience. The lower cost helps the firm stay afloat for just a bit longer. I have thus far introduced the lie of necessary experience. I have proven that it is a lie through deductive reasoning and analogy. I have also addressed 3 empirical studies reinforcing the position, which I was able to determine through deduction and then corroborate from experience. I have also identified the lie's origin and described how it is sustained. Then I provided a frame with which people can more easily understand the damaging effects of the lie. And I have given a reason for the failure of existing legislation to prevent age-based discrimination, which masquerades as an experience requirement. So I say I've done a pretty good job of explaining my position, and it is at this point that others would terminate their tirade because they are losers who enjoy being miserable and are disinterested in finding real solutions to real problems. But I am not like them. I do not want to gasp and gawk at the sight and the smell of the swamp, nor do I want to present implausible solutions to create the illusion that I want to fix the problem so I can avoid criticism for failing to provide one. I want to genuinely solve the problem of the lie so others will not need to suffer unnecessarily, as I and many others have. So, what do I propose we do? I have one solution that is both quick and effective. However, if I share it, then I will be removed from the platform because of its hate speech policies. So I do not express it in words, be they spoken or written, but I will keep it engraved in the stone of my heart. My other solution is easier to accept and to enact. It is a set of 3 simple changes to our vocabulary. First, instead of using the word experience, use the word competence. Do not say that a person needs experience to perform a task. Instead, say they need competence. This is a more truthful statement because a highly experienced and incompetent person is unlikely to perform any given task at a professional level, but a competent person might. Second, instead of saying a recruiter claimed you needed more experience, say that they pretended you needed more experience. This is an equally true statement that addresses the role dishonest hiring managers and recruiters have in propagating the lie that is defrauding half the population. And third, commit the phrase lie of necessary experience to your memory. This is the name of the lie, and remembering it helps us confront it. Feel free to drop it in conversation, online or offline, and defend it by asserting that competence is more valuable than experience and that experience is a poor proxy for competence. With these three changes, we will combat the malevolence of our elders more easily and begin to repair the damage they've done to our social institutions, the job market, intergenerational trust, the workplace, and more or less everything else. Now, before I end this message, I will clarify why I chose to address this topic. The work experience problem is one of many plaguing the collapsing West, and people who suffer it do so acutely. They suffer other problems in other ways as well, and many can be traced to the same societal decay, like a collapsing house falling apart in different places. And most of us cannot combat the collapse because we are atomized and impotent. So it is becoming increasingly necessary for us to find communities and support networks that will aid us during the dark times which lay ahead. Some groups already supposedly serve this purpose, but they are often anemic and run by sociopaths, narcissists, and charlatans who vampirize those who trusted them. Moreover, their organizing principles are poor. So I created a model for a new type of community, which I call a guild, that people can join. I will briefly describe it as a combination of a trade union and an art commune in which people are unified by a shared aesthetic vision. The guilds will be reliable support networks that the legions of lost people can turn to for guidance without worry of exploitation. I am building Elenarda, the Space Guild, to be the first of these. Our members will enjoy a community that can help them endure the dark times ahead. We will aid one another in their job search. We will create our own culture to replace the decaying one we inhabit, and we will prove ours is the right way for the many disaffected and despairing people who populate the West. And we need you. So subscribe to this channel, like and share the video, and join our Discord server in the link down below. This has been Gene of the Space Guild. End transmission.